This is Born Strategist, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about the Gears of War Ultimate Edition beta, and I'm going to be asking the question, is it worth buying? Now, that's a pretty good question. Now, I'm going to start off by saying that I'm not a huge Gears of War fan. Now, nonetheless, I'm going to be very objective here, but I will also note some of my personal preferences, my opinions, and whatnot, so you get a better understanding of my personality. But it's not that difficult to be objective here. So let's go ahead and start off by being objective. Now, when you look at Gears of War, most recently this Unlimited Edition, or I should say Ultimate Edition, you'll notice that it's 1080p and 60 frames per second in multiplayer and 30 frames per second in campaign. Now, it's a fine-tuned, polished product. And if you're a huge Gears of War fan, then you're absolutely going to love this game and you're going to thoroughly enjoy it. Now, if you're a person that couldn't stand Gears of War, then this will not do anything to change your opinion and you will not want to play it. With that said, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the multiplayer, because when I played the beta, it was obviously multiplayer only. There was no single-player campaign to be seen, or even a cooperative campaign to be seen. And when I played it, it took some time to get used to it, but once you kind of figure things out, you kind of get the gist of it, and it's not too difficult to figure out what you need to do and when you need to do it. However, some of the problems that plagued the original Gears of War still exist, such as the over-reliance on the shotgun. Now, there isn't any customization to be seen, with the exception of some character skins that you can choose from. That's about it. You can choose your appearance and what character you would like to play as, but aside from that, there's nothing else. Okay? You can't choose which types of weapons you want to use. You can choose what types of camos you like to put on your weapons, but aside from that, you can't do much else. Now, the one thing that I noticed right off the bat is that you can't use particular things that you used in Gears of War 3. For example, if you're a person that loves using grenades as proximity mines, you can't do that in this game. You can't stick them to walls. Okay, if you're a person that liked to be able to, move around and crawl if you were to get knocked down, can't do that either. Okay, so there's a lot of features in here, as well as weapons that are not in this game when they were in previous games. For example, the Retro Lancer or the double-barreled shotgun. They are non-existent here. They do not exist. And same thing goes for the ink grenades, if you're a big fan of the ink grenades, or the incendiary grenades. So there's a lot of stuff that has been stripped away and taken out of the game, or just not put in, I think is a better way to put it, because to add those things in, it would take some time and effort, and they decided that they just would prefer to keep it as is. With that said, I really wished that they would have done that. They would have put forth the effort and time and energy into adding those particular things in, because I really do believe that they improved upon the Gears of War experience and gave you some variety. So if you didn't want to play a particular way or utilize a particular thing, you didn't have to. But for some reason or another, they decided to go ahead and just ship you the game as it was when it came out in 2006. Which isn't a big problem or anything like that. If people are huge fans of Gears of War, especially the multiplayer, they didn't particularly care for some of the, Gears of War 2 multiplayer or the Gears of War 3 multiplayer or even Judgment, then you don't have to worry about it. Now, I want to go back to multiplayer for a second here, and I want to talk about something. Now, the thing that I've noticed a lot about Gears of War multiplayer is that it only appeals to a very small demographic. Now, when I played Gears of War 3, they had a population counter. Basically, it just shows you the number of people online playing and what region they're playing in, okay? And at the time of Gears of War 3's release, obviously it's going to have the highest, potential numbers because it's a brand new game and a lot of people are eager to play it. Now, from what I remember, the numbers when the game shipped for multiplayer was roughly around 60,000, okay, give or take a couple thousand, okay, and it didn't take too long after the game had shipped for those numbers to dwindle and reduce to the point to where it got to around 20,000. Then, the following week it'd be 10,000 until it finally ended up settling after about a month or so to around 6 to 5,000 on any given night. Now, that doesn't seem like it's going to be, that bad if you have a consistent player base that plays, every single night of the week, because then you still have a loyal fan base that really loves the multiplayer. But one of the main reasons that people didn't like the multiplayer was because of the lack of variety and balance in some of the older Gears of War games. I'm not talking about Gears of War 3, because Gears of War 3, you had the Retro Lancer, you had the Hammer Burst, which, by the way, always existed in previous Gears of War games, but, for example, in the first game, it was a burst-firing rifle, and then it changed, I believe, in Gears of War 3 to a semi-automatic rifle. Okay, I could be mistaken on that because I don't really remember utilizing it too much in Gears of War 2, but I believe in Gears of War 2 it was still a burst-fire weapon. With that said, you also had the Retro Lancer and the double-barreled shotgun that a lot of really competitive players supposedly didn't like because they felt it was a little too noobish. Okay, it just basically, guaranteed that you get a one-shot kill if you're within close proximity of the target that you're attempting to kill, if you manage to hit all of your pellets. Now, there's obviously some other additions in there, such as the mortar and the grinder, which was a big giant Gatling gun that you could use in stationary positions. And if you want to, you can carry it around with you and just fire from the hip. But those are some things that I'm going to be missing, because I did, thoroughly enjoy the Gears of War 3 multiplayer. Okay, I didn't love it, but I did, enjoy it enough to play it multiple times with other people. But when you look at Gears of War, you have to ask yourself this question: why doesn't the multiplayer appeal to that many people? Now, I think one of many reasons is that there really isn't much of a point to play. Okay, you can always raise your rank, but it doesn't mean anything. It's really just there for bragging rights. It's just to show how much time you spent in the game and nothing more. Now, if you play for the pure enjoyment of it, then by all means go ahead, and that's the perfect reason to play. But aside from that, if you're looking for something like Destiny or something like that that has a lot of goals and things to do and things to go after and attempt to achieve and obtain, then you're not going to find that in Gears of War. Okay, if you're a person that just wants to enjoy yourself and play competitively, then rest assured you'll enjoy Gears of War. But the one thing that's difficult about Gears of War is the fact that it's not like other third-person shooters that you've seen out there, especially Gears of War 1, because in Gears of War 1, there was a heavy reliance on the shotgun. Okay, for Gears of War experts, you're already well aware of this. You've known this, pretty much since, the game came out, and since you've had enough time to experience it and utilize that shotgun. Now, that's one of the biggest problems that I have with Gears of War, is that the Lancer, which is really your only other alternative, with the exception of some of the weapons that you pick up in the field and the snub pistol, is that it's really weak. It can't compete even at longer ranges when compared to other weapons. Now, I understand the point of that, meaning that you always want to go for power weapons because your primary weapon is essentially a piece of crap and it doesn't do very much. Now, don't get me wrong. I realize the limitations of the weapons that you use in Gears of War, but I also realize the strengths of those weapons. Now, if you're working with a well-coordinated team, which is rare, if you're playing with randoms, but if you manage to get a group of people and you play together consistently, then you can kind of go ahead and practice and focus your fire on the nearest target and drop them very, very quickly when you're utilizing the Lancers together. And that's something that I didn't see a lot of when I was playing in the beta. Granted, it's a common problem in most, competitive shooters, and that a lot of people don't really want to work together. They just run and gun and, randomly attempt to kill whoever it is that they see first. And, it's not Gears of War's fault. It's just, the way the community is and how they like to play and just the way that they are. And you really can't change anything about it, okay? I can't force everyone to think strategically and play tactically. It's just the way things are. But aside from that, the game was pretty solid. I didn't notice any problems or glitches. It was very smooth. There was no lag issues. That's probably because they're utilizing dedicated servers. Thank goodness for that. And I'll give them credit for that. It's one of the things that they do very well, in that they utilize dedicated servers, and they have been since Gears of War 3. Because if you're a person like me that's played Gears of War 1 and Gears of War 2, and I'm talking about the multiplayer specifically, you'll notice that there was a lot of issues as far as host advantage was concerned. Out of all the games I've played, I think Gears of War had a huge host advantage, more so than other games, probably because most of the characters are really bullet spongy, and trying to drop a host player with a Lancer is damn near impossible unless they're staying completely still and not moving, because the hit detection when you're playing on somebody else's host was terrible. Now, with dedicated servers, you could pretty much eradicate that entirely, and you don't have to bear the burden of being host. Because when I say bear the burden of being host, I mean that everyone's going to criticize everything you do. If you're successful in the game, it's host advantage, which more likely was the case because you do have an advantage. But nonetheless, you don't have to worry about that any longer because they've pretty much eradicated that. Thank goodness for that. And like I said before, Gears of War 1 and 2 did not have any dedicated servers. It was a complete and utter nightmare, especially if you weren't the host, because you were getting your ass kicked by the host frequently. As a matter of fact, the only chance you had of, taking down a host player was to hope, well, one, that they're either crappy, or two, that you have a really good, well-oiled team that's capable of taking down and teaming up on the host to drop him quickly. That was it. Or, maybe potentially utilizing a power weapon such as a boom shot or the sniper rifle. The end result was that you had to put a great deal of effort into focusing on one particular player, which put your team at a disadvantage. But I want to get back to something that I deviated away from earlier, which was, why doesn't Gears of War appeal to many people, specifically the multiplayer? And the reason for that is because, well, one, it's not very customizable. Two, it requires a bit of a learning curve because it's a third-person, covered-based shooter. And the fact that you are heavily reliant on active reloads. Now, just in case you don't know what active reloads are, essentially what you have to do is you have to expend a certain amount of your ammunition, and then you have to reload your weapon and time it just right so that you can gain a damage bonus. Now, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you have people just running around shooting the floor, giving away their position so that they can prepare themselves for when they have to reload so they can gain that damage boost, it just seems a little irritating and nonsensical to me. I think we've evolved beyond that point to where we have to do stuff like that in games. And I'm glad that, in the multiplayer, in the competitive playlist, which was King of the Hill, they decided to go ahead and say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and disable, active reloads. And I am thankful for that. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually do like the active reload mechanic in that if you time it right, then you get rewarded with a faster reload. But if you get it wrong, then you have to jam your gun and you have to wait for the animation to finish before you can load the remaining rounds into your next magazine. And that's awesome. I actually like that. But I like it just as that. I don't like the fact that you gain the active damage boost, or whatever the hell you would call it. I mean, you get some additional damage when you time it just right. I'm not a big fan of that because I don't like running around before I engage in a gun battle and expending, some valuable ammunition simply because I want to gain a damage bonus. And if you're going up against somebody that has, that damage bonus because of active reload, you're going to be at a serious disadvantage if you're engaging in a one-on-one gun battle. Now, I didn't play too much of Judgment. I did play a little bit of the beta, and from what I remember, I believe they did away with the active reload mechanic. In that, you gain the damage boost. They kept everything else the same, but they got rid of the damage boost. And I actually liked that. And that was great, But the thing was that I didn't play too much Judgment because I just couldn't get into Judgment. It wasn't Judgment, it was just Gears of War as a whole. I wasn't really all that interested in Gears of War anymore. And because of that, I just didn't get into it. But as far as, the mechanics were concerned and the control scheme was concerned, it seemed like they had kind of modernized it, and they decided to go with some more universal controls that most people can kind of get into real quickly. Because think about it. You'd be able to swap your weapon by utilizing the Y button, and you'd have one primary weapon and one sidearm. Okay? You weren't able to carry both an assault rifle and a shotgun, at least to my knowledge. And that made it more specialized, and you had to play a particular way. So if you wanted to, engage in close range confrontations, then rest assured you would have to go ahead and do that until you found another weapon to pick up. And that was great. You had to play a particular way. But the thing was is that the hardcore Gears of War audience did not particularly care for all that much, and as a result, they just couldn't get into it. And I remember seeing a video on YouTube one particular person decided to go ahead and do a video talking about, the population count in both Judgment and Gears of War 3. And at the time of Gears of War Judgment's release, they had a high, number of people playing multiplayer in Judgment, I should say. And once, Judgment, had kind of gone on for a couple of weeks, people started deviating away from Judgment and they went back over to Gears of War 3. To the point where Gears of War 3 had a higher population in its multiplayer than Judgment did. So obviously Judgment did not appeal to very many people, and as a result, they just decided to say, fuck Judgment, I'm going back to Gears of War 3. And I said before earlier, I really did enjoy Gears of War 3's multiplayer, okay? But if I had to choose between, some other games such as, Destiny or Halo or whatever, I would probably prefer them more so than Gears of War. Nothing against Gears of War, it's just, it's unique, and it's not something that appeals to very many people, because unless you're like a huge run and gun, type player and you love using shotguns, you're probably not going to gravitate towards Gears of War's multiplayer because it's just not your thing. Sometimes people like using auto rifles, like they do in Destiny, or, pistols, or, other weapons that aren't restricted to just one particular play style. And if you're a person that likes variety, then I strongly recommend that you do not get Gears of War Ultimate Edition, because if you do, you're going to be strongly disappointed. Okay, it's not a game that has a great deal of variety. It's a game that has very little to no customization. And if there is customization in it, it's all aesthetic. It doesn't actually impact the game, which I'm sure a lot of purists are going to be very happy of, because you don't have to worry about someone coming into a game with a retro Lancer when you have a Lancer. You have to worry about this rock, paper, scissors game. You just can completely throw that out and don't have to worry about that crap any longer, because everyone has the exact same stuff. With that said, what's your thoughts? What's your opinions? Do you want to pick up the Ultimate Edition, or are you not looking forward to the Ultimate Edition? Let me know in the comments. And until next time, thanks for watching. And for more Objector reviews, strategy guides, commentaries, and more, stay tuned to this channel.